Exactly.
And, it's so elusive that emperors, archaeologists, and believers from 3 of the major world religions have been hunting for it for millennia.
It really is the ultimate historical enigma. I mean, we're talking about a physical artifact carrying the literal weight of the divine, yet it's entirely missing from the map.
Exactly. Welcome to today's deep dive. I'm so glad you're joining us for this because we are unpacking an incredibly detailed, just fascinating narrative today.
Yeah, we really are.
We're pulling from a breakdown by the YouTube channel called Al-Mufid Islamic, and the topic is the Taboot Sakina,
which folks in the West would know better as the Ark of the Covenant.
Right, the Ark of the Covenant and the Haikal, Sulemani, or Solomon's Temple. Now, before we really get into the weeds here, I do need to state something very clearly. Because this single golden box sits right at the fiery intersection of Jewish, Christian, and Islamic histories, we are stepping into this strictly as impartial observers.
Absolutely.
We are not endorsing these viewpoints, and we aren't taking any sides. We are just impartially reporting on the deep theological lore and cultural claims outlined in this source narrative to, help you understand them.
Yeah, and understanding these claims, regardless of your personal worldview, is absolutely essential. I mean, we aren't just talking about like an Indiana Jones plot point here.
Right, not just movie magic.
Exactly. The mythology surrounding this lost artifact it's basically this invisible engine driving some of the most complex geopolitical tensions in the modern Middle East.
So, okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand why modern nations are still fighting over this box, we have to look at how it was built, what was inside it, and where it actually came from.
And the source narrative gives us a very specific blueprint for this.
Yeah, it does. It says it measures about 3 yards long and 2 yards wide. So essentially, the footprint of a large dining room table.
Yeah, a pretty massive box. And the materials are what make it truly imposing. It was constructed from shamshad wood.
Shamshad wood. Okay.
Right, which is a type of evergreen boxwood. It's known for being incredibly dense, really heavy, and highly resistant to rot.
So it's the kind of wood you use when you want something to survive for centuries.
Exactly. But they didn't just wood or box. The entire structure was plated in solid gold, both inside and out.
Wow. Inside and out, yeah.
And the lid itself was just this massive slab of solid gold, and it was topped with the figures of 2 birds.
And the source mentions something specific about those birds, right?
It does. The tradition holds that God would literally communicate with the prophet Moses from the space right between those 2 birds.
That is just incredible imagery. So the box itself is basically a fortress. It's the ultimate spiritual time capsule, but the contents are even more profound, right?
Oh, absolutely. Inside this golden vault, you had the staffs of the prophets Moses and Aaron.
Okay.
It also held the original stone tablets of the Torah that were brought down from Mount Sinai.
Which is huge on its own.
Right. But it also contained the clothes of Moses. And this is where it gets really intense, an actual physical body.
Wait, a body?
Yeah, the bones and the clothes of the prophet Joseph.
So they put human remains inside this pristine golden box?
They did. And the inclusion of Joseph's bones is... it's a vital detail here. It wasn't just some morbid collection.
It sounds kind of morbid, I won't lie.
Sure, it sounds that way to us, but keeping those remains was about fulfilling a generational promise. They promised to bring him out of Egypt and back to the promised land.
Ah, okay. So it represented this unbroken continuity for the people.
Exactly. And alongside those remains, the box held a bottle of manna.
Manna, as in the heavenly food from the desert.
The very same. And keeping a physical sample of that manna was a really deliberate psychological tool.
How so?
Well, think about it. When future generations were eventually secure and comfortable, looking at that jar of manna would force them to remember the vulnerability of their ancestors.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wandering the barren desert, completely dependent on divine intervention just to survive the day.
Exactly. It kept them grounded.
Okay, but look, I have to push back playfully here on the sheer logistics of this object.
Okay, let's hear it.
You have a massive chest made of incredibly dense boxwood. You plate it inside and out with heavy gold. You add a solid gold lid. Then you fill it with stone slabs and physical human remains. The sheer tonnage of this artifact, dragging a solid gold vault through a harsh desert environment just seems completely counterintuitive to survival.
That is such a fair point. But what's fascinating here is that this physical burden brings us to the central paradox of the artifact.
Okay.
And it's embedded right in its name, Taboot Sakina. The word Sakina translates to peace, tranquility, and comfort.
Peace and tranquility.
Right. So the physical weight of the box was meant to be entirely eclipsed by the psychological and spiritual relief it provided to the believers' hearts.
Oh, I see. So carrying it wasn't seen as a logistical nightmare at all.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It was seen as carrying the anchor of their civilization. And, the narrative traces its origins far beyond human craftsmanship anyway.
Right. It didn't just start in a workshop.
No. The lore states it actually descended directly from heaven to the prophet Adam.
Wow.
And then it was inherited by a staggering lineage of, get this, 124,000 prophets.
124,000. So it passes through this massive lineage, reaches the prophet Jacob, then Moses, and eventually the Israelites.
Correct.
But an object with that kind of cosmic pedigree isn't going to just sit quietly in a tent.
Oh, definitely not. It was active.
Right. The Ark was basically deployed as an active weapon and an absolute judge. To me, it operates almost like a divine radioactive core.
That is a great way to put it.
Because if you manage it correctly, respect it, follow the rigorous protocols, it powers your entire civilization with peace and guarantees victory. But if you disrespect it, that exact same energy destroys you.
Yes. And just like radiation, proximity without protection is completely fatal.
What?
The narrative actually describes how the Ark was carried to the front lines of ancient battles.
By the military.
Well, by religious leaders, but with a full army escort. It was treated as the ultimate tactical advantage. You put it out front, and you win.
That's wild.
And beyond warfare, it functioned as the Supreme Court of the era.
The Supreme Court. How does a box do that?
So for really complex disputes among the people, the issue would be presented before the Ark, and a voice would literally emerge from the box to deliver a final, unarguable verdict.
See, here's where it gets really interesting, because this introduces a massive contradiction in the historical timeline.
Okay, where are we going with this?
If this heavy golden box is actively guaranteeing military victory and literally dispensing divine justice out loud, how on earth did the Israelites end up losing it to an opposing army?
The capture.
Yeah, because the narrative explicitly states it was captured by the Amalekite army. An army holding a guaranteed victory artifact shouldn't be losing battles.
Right, it seems like a plot hole. But that actually exposes the core mechanism of how the Ark's power functioned.
Okay, break that down for me.
It wasn't just an automatic magic spell. You didn't just hold it and win. The protection it offered was entirely conditional on the people's strict obedience to divine law.
So they had to earn it.
Exactly. The artifact demanded moral and theological purity from its keepers. When the Israelites fell into sin and openly disobeyed those commands, the Sakina, that divine peace and tactical protection, it just simply evaporated.
Oh, wow. So it turned off, basically.
The box reverted to being just heavy wood and gold. So without the divine backing, they lost the battle, and the Amalekites took the Ark as a spoil of war.
Okay, so the Amalekites captured the most famous artifact in the ancient world, but then they make a catastrophic error in how they handle it.
A huge mistake.
Because according to the source, they treat it like a discarded piece of furniture. They place it in a dirty, completely disrespectful location.
Yeah, they did not respect the radioactive core, to use your analogy.
Exactly. And the backlash is immediate. The source says they are hit with severe diseases, and 5 of their towns are utterly leveled.
Just completely destroyed.
Yeah. So they quickly realize this golden box isn't a trophy. It's a curse, destroying their society from the inside out.
Their solution was just pure panic.
What'd it do?
They loaded this priceless, terrifying artifact onto a simple ox cart and literally just drove it out of their territory.
Just sent it away.
Yeah. But the narrative then introduces this profound supernatural intervention. Once the Ark was wandering on the ox cart, 4 angels actually descended to guide it back to the prophet Samuel.
Wait, angels physically guided the cart.
That's what the tradition says. And this specific event carries immense theological weight. The source notes that the Quran, specifically Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 248, points to this angelic return of the Ark as the ultimate divine sign.
A sign of what?
They prove that King Taboot, whom Western history usually knows as King Saul, was the rightful, divinely chosen ruler. The angels bringing it back legitimized his kingship.
Okay, so the Ark is returned. But now you have this highly volatile, radioactive artifact that attracts angels and destroys towns.
Right, you need to be careful with it.
Yeah, you can't just park that back in the modest 25 by 5 foot tent that Moses originally used in the Sinai Desert.
No, absolutely not. It requires a permanent containment structure.
So King David eventually brings the Ark to Jerusalem, specifically Mount Zion or Bethel, and he begins planning a permanent home for it.
Right, but he doesn't actually get to build it. The execution of that massive plan falls to his son, King Solomon.
Ah, Okay.
And Solomon spends 39 years constructing what becomes known as the Haikal Sulemani, or Solomon's Temple.
39 years.
Yeah. But the scope of this project goes far, far beyond human engineering. The narrative claims Solomon didn't just draft human stonemasons, he commanded the jinn.
Okay, for anyone unfamiliar, in Islamic tradition, the jinn are these unseen entities created from smokeless fire.
Exactly.
They exist parallel to humanity, and they often possess immense strength and supernatural capabilities. So Solomon uses them to execute the impossible heavy lifting required to build a temple worthy of this ark.
Yeah, he sends these unseen forces across the known world to harvest raw wealth. We're talking massive quantities of rubies, emeralds, pearls, gold, and silver.
Just extracting all of it.
Right. And they construct this sprawling architectural marvel, which culminates in a highly restricted inner sanctum called the Quds Olakas.
The Holy of Holies.
Exactly.
Right.
This was the dedicated, deeply isolated room built specifically to house the Taboot Sakina.
But the construction phase itself contains, I think, one of the most fascinating metaphors in this entire mythology.
The story of his death.
Yes, because the temple takes decades to build, right? And Solomon's mortal life reaches its end before the work is actually finished.
Right, but he knows the jinn won't keep working if he's gone.
Exactly. To ensure the jinn don't just abandon the project the second he dies, Solomon devises this incredible illusion.
It's so clever.
He positions himself inside a transparent glass room called a mihrab. He stands upright, leaning heavily on his wooden staff, appearing to be locked in deep, intimidating prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And he passes away right there, remaining completely vertical.
And the jinn working outside the glass can clearly see the king watching them.
They think he's just keeping an eye on them.
Right. So operating out of sheer terror of his authority, they continue their exhausting labor for an entire year.
A whole year.
Yeah. They're completely unaware that they are taking orders from a corpse.
So what does this all mean? The illusion holds perfectly until a single termite enters the picture.
Right, a tiny bug.
The narrative calls it the Taboot alard. This tiny insect slowly eats away at the interior of Solomon's wooden staff.
Just hollowing it out from the inside.
Yeah, and after a year of doing this, the staff finally snaps. Solomon's body collapses to the floor, and the jinn instantly realize they've been fooled. The incredible irony here.
It really is.
You have the most colossal, supernaturally powered build-a project in human history, directed by a king commanding spirits, and the entire facade is brought down by a termite.
It's amazing. And it perfectly illustrates the limits of power in this theology.
How so?
Well, think about the jinn. They possess all this supernatural strength, but they lack divine omniscience. They couldn't even sense that the man standing 10 feet away from them was dead for a year.
Right. They were totally blind to it.
It contrasts the absolute, unquestionable power of the divine against the fragile, temporary nature of human empires. I mean, even Solomon, with all his wealth and absolute authority over the unseen world, falls to the floor because of a burrowing insect.
That is a powerful lesson. But despite the supernatural origins of the temple, its physical walls are still subject to human warfare, right?
Unfortunately, yes. The ultimate fortress is eventually breached.
Right. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon attacks Jerusalem, burns the Haikal Sulemani to the ground, and he loots the ark as spoils of war.
And then the Romans later bring their own destruction to the site.
Which kicks off a multi-millennia treasure hunt that is still going on to this very day.
It really is. The disappearance of the ark has spawned countless theories across the entire globe.
Where do people think it is?
Well, one major historical tradition points toward Africa. The claim is that King Solomon entrusted the ark to Ibn Hakim, who is historically known as Menelik I, his son with the Queen of Sheba.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he supposedly transported the artifact to Aksum in modern-day Ethiopia, establishing a dynasty there that guarded the ark for 2,000 years.
But there are other modern searchers pushing entirely different coordinates, right?
Oh, yeah. You have people like the modern archaeologist Ron Wyatt. He claimed it was hidden in a cave system somewhere within the Middle East.
I've also heard some searchers have spent fortunes digging around locations in England.
Yeah, people look everywhere. And then, of course, you have the purely prophetic locations.
Right.
Islamic eschatology, just like, the study of the end times, points to places like Lake Tiberias in Palestine, or a hidden cave in Antioch, Turkey, where it supposedly waits to be discovered by Imam Mahdi.
Okay, but logically, let me push back here. We are talking about a massive table made of solid wood and heavy gold, packed with extremely famous artifacts. During an era where invading armies routinely melted down everything of value just to fund their empires, how does an object like this vanish without a trace for thousands of years?
Well, this raises an important question, because if we look at it strictly as a physical object, the odds of it surviving the Babylonian or Roman conquests intact are, well, incredibly slim.
Right, it probably got melted down into coins.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the search for the Taboot Sakina is no longer about archaeology. It's about ideology.
Ideology.
The source narrative points out that modern efforts to locate the Ark, particularly by certain Jewish archaeological movements, are actually driven by a desire to reclaim the geopolitical dominance and the spiritual authority that the Ark represents.
So it's essentially like an invisible deed to a property.
That's a good way to look at it.
The physical paper might be lost, but the emotional and legal claim to the land it represents is causing a fierce neighborhood war.
Exactly. The desire to find the Ark isn't about, filling a glass case in a museum somewhere. It is directly tied to highly specific prophecies concerning the end of the world.
And this is what dictates the current reality on the ground in Jerusalem.
Yes. And according to the source narrative, and again, maintaining our impartial view here, the ultimate goal in certain Jewish traditions is to construct a third temple, exactly on the footprint of the original Haikal Sulemani.
But the friction lies in the fact that this specific geography is currently occupied by the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound, right? Which is one of the holiest sites in Islam.
Exactly. That's the flashpoint.
And the tradition states that rebuilding this temple is a required trigger for the end times. The belief holds that doing so will unlock a specific claim in Jerusalem, allowing their king to enter the city, who will then literally raise the dead in his wake.
Right. But the Islamic narrative views that exact same sequence of events through a fiercely opposing lens.
How so?
In Islamic theology, the king that this rebuilt temple would welcome is actually the Dajjal.
The Dajjal. Okay.
Right, the false messiah or antichrist figure. Conversely, the Islamic tradition holds that Imam Mahdi will be the one to finally unearth the true Ark.
So finding it is central to both.
Yes, but for different reasons. For Imam Mahdi, finding it won't just be an archaeological victory, it will serve as the indisputable proof of his divine leadership to all the major religions of the world.
It is just incredible to me how a box that was literally named Sakina, which means peace and tranquility, has evolved into the focal point of such intense, high-stakes global division.
It's the ultimate paradox, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, grasping these narratives, regardless of what you personally believe, is absolutely vital.
Completely agree.
You simply cannot untangle the modern geopolitical map of the Middle East without factoring in the thousands of years of theological weight bearing down on that one specific plot of land in Jerusalem.
The absence of this artifact is almost more powerful than its presence ever was.
It really is. It shapes foreign policy today.
Well, we've covered a massive expanse of history and theology today. From the incredibly dense boxwood construction to the tiny termite that exposed the jinn, you now have a much deeper grip on the profound lore behind the Ark of the Covenant and Solomon's Temple.
Yeah, it is a hugely complex web of narratives, but unpacking the mechanisms behind these beliefs is crucial for anyone trying to understand the deeper currents of our modern world.
Absolutely. Thank you for walking us through it. And to you listening, as you move through the rest of your day, consider the ultimate irony of this lost artifact. If the Taboot Sakina were actually pulled from a cave in Turkey or a lake in Palestine tomorrow and verified for the entire world to see, would the box of peace finally bring the Sakina it was named for, or would its discovery instantly ignite the greatest conflict humanity has ever seen?